And thank you all for being here. And Shabbat Shalom. Very nice. The essence of Shabbat is what I'm talking about, which is the non-dual awareness of who we aren't. And that's really key. That's what Shabbat really is about. And the talk is about portals to that. So we're going to start with the path, the paradoxical path between the blima and the ma, the nothing and the something, and how important it is to hold both of those. The shemikud kudushabrihu ushihinte bi'ilu or imulaye chemuke bavavke b'yuda shalom b'shem kozriel ko olam. Amen. So feel your oneness, the wild walk between Bilima and Ma. In order to get, talking about portals, you want to say, portals to what? And one of the hardest things in this whole discussion is the discussion itself. So when I say non-dual duality, that kind of connection, we have many levels of that. We have our ordinary talk, our only discussion, right, wrong, good, bad. That's a form of duality. And that's also a form of talk. And to be very clear, people tend to say, oh, I'm above that all, and only refer to the absolute. And that is a serious, unawake misunderstanding that makes you one up, if you follow. You're talking here and they say, oh yeah, but it's all one. Okay. So the second reality is whatever God does is for the best. Still a level of duality that we're talking about. I see, well, I don't understand this, but whatever God does is for the best. Very important understanding, key. And then there's a third understanding. It's all a dream, so nothing's happening anyway. So forget it. Doesn't matter whatever God does for the best, there's nothing happening, so nothing's going on. Life just got really easy, and we're moving into kind of a deeper level of non-dual reality. That's all a dream. And then the fourth level is a level that isn't talked about very much. Histokut, dying into the nothing. And that awareness is you don't exist. That's beyond the non-dual discussion, because in the Advaita Vedanta, non-dual, you still exist. But histokut, dying in the nothing, you cease to exist. So we're beyond non-dual, because there's no you to perceive non-dual. So we're talking portals to these levels of awareness. Ultimately, Herut Devi Kut. So that's very important. And important in that language, which gets us in all kinds of trouble, is to understand the Torah view of enlightenment is that we are multidimensional beings. We really are on all levels. We're on that level of rights and wrongs, and we're on the level of the world of absolute, the oneness, and ultimately another dimension is where we don't even exist. Now that's not, as I said, that's not written about that much, but that is my sharing, part of my sharing, because everything I'm talking about comes from my experience. In fact, in the background of this whole discussion, everything I ever learned was from meditation. I don't, it's all good. All the philosophies are interesting, but until you've had a direct experience of it, you're just talking. It's just words. So it needs to come from that place of direct experience. So that's kind of a bigger picture, and we don't want to be like Elisha ben Aluya in the Part A story, where he has the awareness of Absolute, the Nondual Awareness, and he just stays there. He says, well, you don't really need to do mitzvah, you don't need to do this, I'm free. And what's the problem with that? Obviously, it wasn't very well accepted. Only Rabbi Akiba walked out as a multidimensional being. It wasn't accepted because he broke the flow of energy. As fully enlightened beings, we're talking, we are the full awareness on all dimensions, and we're operating on all dimensions, not simply the world of Absolute. This is one of the serious problems with what I call people walking around being neo-Advaita Vedantas. Am I talking language you know or not? Okay. So neo-Advaita Vedanta are I'm obviously not going to name names, that's not the point, are saying, you're already it. There's no work, there's no sadhana. You're it, just wake up. That's the neo-Advaita Vedanta approach. It is not really related to the truth of classical Advaita Vedanta. Who I'm talking about? Shankaracharya, and then Nisargata, who we know, and Ramana Maharshi. What do they teach? Well, they basically taught, I'll go back to Shankaracharya, Vairagya equal vision. Okay? Viveka, being able to tell the difference between the real and unreal. And then, I'm kind of moving away from the Sanskrit terms now, desire for God. Just deep, deep desire for God. And the fourth is kind of control over the mind, all the senses, ability to concentrate and to focus and to have faith. The word faith is in there. These are the four qualities and four understandings that they talked about. To be specific, they talked about there are portals. One has to, in a sense, move beyond the ego, and you don't necessarily do it like that. That's 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million people. But for most people, we have levels of understanding, okay? And using a slightly different system, we have the upayas. How many people are familiar with that term? Okay, so we have Shiva upaya. It's called doing the mitzvah, okay? We have mantra upaya, which is repeating the name of God, but also love of God. And we have Anyapaya, the direct knowing. They are not separate, they're not cut off, they're integrated flow. And in classical Advaita Vedanta, I'm referring to that just because I want people to understand that the neo-Advaita Vedantas may give you the correct philosophy, but are they walking the talk? Walking the talk is classical Advaita Vedanta, meaning you are really living, you are the expression of the Nondual Awareness. And there is a huge difference. But to get there classically, which isn't really talked about because it's common understanding, you really have to do the, I'm going to say mitzvot in our language, but you have to do sadhana. You have to wean yourself away from the ego. It doesn't happen in one day. It's just not the way it usually goes. And then, so I call it the mitzvot, the, halcha, the walk. You have to walk the walk. Okay, and that's really what we're going to be talking about in a moment, walking the walk. Okay, and then hamtaka, which I call bhakti, a love of God, God merging. Okay, and then akdut. How many people are familiar with that word? It's a great word. It means the direct knowing of the oneness. Okay, that's anyupaya, the direct knowing. But you just don't get to the direct knowing out of the blue. You build, and 20 years later, or 5 years later, or 3 years later, if you're Nisargadatta, you get it. Bang. But you have a foundation to hold it. You build your vessels so you can hold the energy. So, in the Pardes story, where Rabbi Akiba, who was fully enlightened and worked as a multidimensional being, the first person went up and died because he couldn't hold the energy. He had the vision of God and died. Okay, the second person, Shimon ben Zoma, had the vision and went crazy. Couldn't hold the energy. Couldn't hold the paradox. Enlightenment, it's got a lot of paradoxes. Couldn't hold the multidimensionality. It went crazy. And then Elisha ben Avuya got stuck on one plane. We call it, the plane of the now, just for an easy language. I am that, that's it. And so he couldn't be the multidimensional being. So one of the issues when we talk about the portals is a vision, an understanding of enlightenment that says we're truly multi-dimensional beings. That's a key model, because then we're able to make the energy flow for the full length of our beingness. Okay, so that's one part where we're going. The other thing that happens is hit pashtut. Anybody know what that means? You're able to move in any direction. No boundaries. So a liberated being can move in any direction. We're not observing protocol. We're not even trying to observe how you're supposed to look as a liberated being. And a lot of people have that act going. You may have seen me jumping up and down last night and climbing up the palm tree. You're just free to move in any direction. It doesn't matter. Now, there is something else to that. It is both individual and societal operations that still acknowledge and honor the other. So you're not doing any act, but you're doing it within a context of a moral sensitivity. Because, again, in Advaita Vedanta, the real Advaita Vedanta, there's morals, there's ethics, there's rights and wrong, because that's the first level of non-duality. We have not separated ourselves from the multiple levels of reality, because a fully awake person is operating on all those levels. They're not amoral. Okay? And if you look at people like Nisargadatta, Shankaracharya, 6th century AD, and Ramana Maharshi, they all did what's known as puja, which are heart, bhakti, dualistic exercises. Each day they connected and opened the heart to God. So when somebody says, I'm Advaita, nothing is real, I'm disconnected, that's not really exactly the right understanding. At the highest level, everything is real. Everything is the unbroken expression of the divine. So we're literally seeing holiness in everything. Seeing and experiencing it. Because in the non-dual reality, there's only God. So there's this dance going on, and it's only God. And our work, our awareness, is making Yehudim, emerging. So whatever we're seeing, we're connecting to it as the expression of the divine. So that's that's really more classical Advaita Vedanta, Nondual Awareness. So I'm kind of giving you a feeling for a much more, let's say, liberated thing. So a liberated being, which is where we're having portals to, is hit pashut, able to move in any direction, sees themselves or experiences everything in a multidimensional way, is able to talk on all the levels of discourse, okay, is, in a sense, has touched in at least to the void, and from prior to the void, the non-causal awareness, non-causal joy, awareness of the oneness, non-causal joy, non-causal peace, non-causal love. Our true human nature begins to emanate. You're not trying. You have non-causal compassion. Not because anyone told you to be compassionate, because that's a good thing to do. No. But because that's who we are. We are non-causal. Non-causal means without cause. In other words, you have love without cause. It's not like, I love you. That has cause. Non-causal is, I'm love. And I'm sharing that love with you. Non-causal peace is, I'm peace. I'm sharing that love with you and that peace with you. I'm compassion. I'm sharing. So it's the direct experience without any outer cause, without any philosophy, but from our direct experience, our direct apperception. So these are qualities of the liberated being. And at the same time, the liberated being, using kind of a different language, has woken up from the dream. That means to wake up. What are you waking up from? From the dream. What's the dream? Is the word the I amness. That's the primordial delusion. Amadashikra, the deluded world. Amadapurda, the dual world. We wake up from that and understand there is no I amness. There's only that. So a liberated being has awakened from the duality, the dream of I amness. That's the key. That takes them out of the matrix. They're no longer part of the collective belief system. And in that process, as it goes deeper, we go prior to the void, prior to nothing. Histokut. We die into the nothing. As it says in the Torah, no one shall see God and live. And that's literal, just so you get it. Literal in the sense that you die into nothing and you stop existing as anything separate from God. But the truth is, at that state, there's not even God. There's only, I don't even know how to explain it. Nothing exists. Okay? This is the deeper levels of the liberated state. Okay? And of course, if you're at that level, you come out. Here's the boot. What's the big deal? You go in any direction, it doesn't matter. It's all God. There's no formalities, there's no rules. Again, understand, we're not saying the 10 speakings that we ignore. I'm not really saying that. It's within the context. And this is why the real Advaita Vedanta, as well as the Torah as a Guide to Enlightenment, this book obviously I wrote, all have moral and ethical frameworks. So at the world of Absolute, there isn't, of course, because nothing exists, nothing even happened. But when we're multidimensional beings, we get that on the world of Asya, the physical world, we got morals, we have ethics, and one has to kind of hold that understanding. That's what makes us multidimensional beings. We hold it and we know it's not real. Now, that's an overview with that experience of the non-causal love, peace, joy, and that, the pashtut, moving in any direction, multidimensional being. And one other piece, in the emptiness that gets created, it is filled by the will of God, what we know as Keter. Now that's when you can align yourself with the will of God, that's a level of liberation, or you simply are the will of God unfolding because there's no separation. You are Keter, the will of God unfolding. So at higher levels, that's more what a liberated being is experiencing. There isn't the will of God and I choose to align with that. Okay? Very subtle distinction, but still when you're free to align with the will of God, that's at the first levels of liberation, and that's good. So these are qualities that go on that are, and again, qualities, but the deepest knowing is to know you don't exist. Okay? It's not like I am that, because you still exist as I am that. Even though that's the classical way we talk about liberation, and that certainly is a level, but there's that level beyond. Histakut, dying into nothing. So that's a framework about what these portals are about. Now let's talk about the portals. I already mentioned the Shiva Apaya Shanta Apaya Mantra repetition, and finally Anupaya, direct knowing. I'm going to say the mitzvot, Hamataka, the sweetness of God, Bhakti, and Akdut. Those are the Torah words for exactly the same thing. And so I dealt with now about the Veda Vedanta approaches that the real Veda Vedanta actually has you doing sadhana. Why do you do sadhana? So you understand that personality is a case of mistaken identity. That's why you do sadhana. And you get so deep in your soul, you're beyond time, you're beyond space, and you're beyond I amness, the primordial dream to which we're all born into. And you're beyond the mind. The mind, when when at level of sadhana, you begin to understand the mind is an unawakened noose around your neck, constricting your total understanding. So the work then is, how do you wake up? How do you get to the place of understanding the personality? It's a case of mistaken identity. In a sense, and this is a little subtle, you have your ego, but you are not your ego. I want to explain that because people really get confused on that issue. Your ego represents your personality and represents your physical vehicle, which is part of your personality. The unawakened person actually thinks they are their vehicle, and they are their mind. The awake person says, well, yeah, here's my physical vehicle. I really do need to take care of it because it's got to get me around to where I'm going. Here is my mind. I have to take care of my mind because I need it to operate in the world. But it's not who I am. And so we don't put down those pieces of equipment. We don't say bad, bad, bad. No, we're beyond that. We use that to be the expression of the will of God in the world. We appreciate, we take care of, we use it, but we aren't it. Is that clear? Is that making sense? So this is not anyway, depreciating the ego. It's just a different relationship with it. It's not who we are. Okay. So sadhana is how do we separate ourselves from all that. So we have the mitzvot, we have the different practices. Now I'm going to translate that, okay? For example, we have yogasana. It's very important. mastery of the body, freeing ourselves from the body. There's like different levels. What was shared this morning is that the asana is a proper seat in your body, which is perfectly excellent. I'm going to add one more definition, is asana is also how we sit on the earth. Proper seat on the earth, meaning to all of creation. Proper way of relating, okay? And part of all the mitzvot is working all that out. And so we have, and now we have the yama and niyamas, or we have the 10 speakings, okay, or the 613 mitzvot, but when we understand those, they come down to the righteous, as Habakkuk said in 2:4, the righteous live by their faith alone. Or, as Amos says, seek God and live. Bottom line. Now, what does live mean? If you look at Sarah, it says she was alive all 127 years of her life. What are we talking about? An awake person is alive. They are wild. They are a live wire. They're happening, okay? Without any social constraints. I mean, they're obviously using common sense and so forth, but it's an aliveness. So in the Torah definition, alive means you're totally turned on to life. Now, not in a materialistic way. The fact is you are the expression of God as life. Very different concept. You simply are life happening. So these are subtle but very important distinctions. So the mitzvot, the pranayam, bring in the life, eating the live foods, makes everything functional more. We build the pranic force, and again I mentioned pranayama, but also Tai Chi, Qigong, different things can increase that. Sacred dance can increase it, okay? And then we have service and charity. Why is that part of it? Because it's open your heart. And when we kind of get it, traditionally, back to the time of King David, you know, when we talked about the qualities of the 613 mitzvot, he got it down to 11. One of them is taking care of being benevolent. Like, what's the big deal? Being benevolent. It's a big deal in today's society. And what King David talked about in Psalm 15:1 is really important. Simplicity. A simple life. Now, your life can be very complex, but you're simple in your relationship to your life. And in that simplicity, to be able to distinguish on the world of Asya, forces that elevate you and forces that bring you down. Darkness, light and darkness, okay? It's not that complicated. Acting with authenticity, speaking the truth. Simple. Not that complicated, you know? Satya. If we talk about yama and niyamas and that whole thing. It's just speaking the truth, okay? Not with deception, not with slander, but simply speaking truth, and speaking the truth in a benevolent way. Okay? None of this is that complicated. And the different qualities of acting honorably, keeping your word, these are, you know, the things that David's talking about. Again, acting honorably. What would happen in society today if everybody acted honorably? What would happen? Everything would be turned upside down. And we'd really be into what the Mayans talk about, the 6 teku, or what we talk about in this tradition, the steps of the Messiah. It's not that complicated. Simplicity here, simplicity, okay? It's what we're talking about. Telling the truth, acting simply, acting truthfully, acting, you know, with beneficence with each other. Doing good deeds. None of this is complicated, and that's why he called it simple. So I'm bringing that in to help us understand the kind of the core essence of the way of the Torah and of the way of the mitzvot. And, you know, I'll mention obviously the yogic way as well. So there's very, very, very little difference at all. Okay? So these are the mitzvot. The next level is hamtaka, sweetness. What's sweet? Well, honey sweet, but that's not what we're talking about, okay? We're on a phase 1 diet. We're not having less sugar. The sweetness is the love of God and the sweetness that comes from it, the turn on to knowing God. And in that sweetness, we enter into the second level of that, which is the divine urge, Teshakut Devikut, the divine urge. And that's a little bit what Shankaracharya talked about, this real drive to know God. But the truth is, the divine urge pulls you along. It's pulling you along. You're not creating it. But I'm showing overlaps here. So that's an extremely important part. And that has to be activated. Okay? And along with that, Nesikat Devikut, meaning the divine kiss. Now, I'm going to give you a slightly different, now remember, this is level 2. First we got, you're doing all the good deeds and mitzvahs and everything. It's extremely important. Those are the foundations. Those are what build your vessels. So you don't, like Shimon ben Azai, get an experience of God and die. Not the best way to do things. Okay? If you have mission on earth. Okay? Because he did not build the vessels that were needed. So we do our mitzvah, we do our way of life, we do, you know, and what happens is we have the vessels that can hold the energy. Okay? The next step is this activation. And this is a different way of understanding the idea of Shefa, the idea of the Shekhinah, and the idea of Kundalini. How are they different? What is Kundalini? It's an activation of the divine force within us. And when it's activated, the divine urge is activated. It just pulls you along. I write in my book, Spiritual Nutrition, once the divine urge gets going, it's like you're a bull in heat, you know, and that's what's going on. Okay, it's a masculine image, but you get the image. Okay, and Nesikat Devikut is the divine kiss, and when we understand that, that's Shaktipat. Okay, Shaktipat is the divine kiss from the heavens that wakes you up and activates the divine urge. Now when the Kundalini is awakened, it goes through all the 72,000 nadis, all the pathways, activating it, and waking up the chakras. But the bottom line, it's activated the divine urge from God. It is pushing you along. It's the last switch that needs to be turned on before liberation. So it's pulling you to liberation, cleansing, purifying, and really creating a whole new awareness. The deeper meaning of Kundalini, deeper meaning of Shaktipat, and later today we will be, I'll be a vehicle for that descent of grace. So that's the third word here is grace. The awakening of Kundalini is grace. Now, the way grace works is you put yourself in the position where you can receive grace. They come to a retreat like this, where you're going to get Shaktipat, and it's like, well, I'm in the right place, and if it's time for me to wake from that grace, it's going to awaken. But at least I showed up. Got to start somewhere. Okay? It's not going to happen, well, it can happen in the middle of the street in Tel Aviv, but that's rare. Okay? So kind of keep that in mind. And that's hamtaka, the devotion and love of the divine that gets activated when the Kundalini is awakened. It's like, the divine urge, the divine kiss, and then your heart is just opening to God. It's like, wow, you can't help yourself. And it's a love affair. Okay, get that it's a love affair. And you look at all the Kabbalistic mystics, they all use sexual metaphors because it's true. It's a love affair. End point, merging with the divine, Devi Kut. Now, all this is going on, and there are other things that are brought in at this time, and other things emerge. One is the power of meditation. For me, like meditation, as I say, everything I ever learned was from meditation, because you have meditation has many qualities. Yoga Chirti Virti Nirodha, quieting the mind. Okay, the very first steps of yoga, quieting the mind. Maybe some people think that's the end. For me, that's the first steps. Okay? So quiet the mind. That's good. 2, meditation is transformative. You become transformed, particularly when the Kundalini is awakening, because it's working on you more actively in meditation. It really doesn't stop. Wow, okay? Transformation's going on. So whenever you meditate, this whole healing is going on. You're burning up some scars, which are old kind of memory thought form patterns. They're being burned out of the shishum and all that. So when you're meditating, the Kundalini is naturally enhanced. Okay? And along with that, Hagia. Mantra is very, very important. And we've been chanting the name of God yesterday pretty endlessly. And mantra repetition continually keeps you in the awareness of God. One of my kind of mentors, who's come to me more on the spiritual plane, is Sai Baba of Shirdi, who left his body in 1918. And there's an interesting story. I managed to read everything was ever written about him or him. It's a very beautiful story. He used to kind of float on a string, when he'd sleep. He was a fool. He had all the yogic cities. And he asked Sai Baba of Shirdi. Shirdi is a little bit near Nasik in the Maharashtra district in India. And he asked one of his devotees, put your hand on my heart and wake me up if you stop hearing the name of God. What kind of message? Of course, he woke up, later he woke up and said, oh, no, it never stopped. What it means is that when you are repeating the name of God enough times, it actually becomes radiating out of your shoes. Radiating out of your heart. And then you become the mantra. And it's important to hear, I'm talking about when you're asleep too. Awake, sleep, doesn't matter. Those are just states. The mantra is always going on. You're reverberating the name of God. And the name of God and God are one. So you're filling yourself with the name of God all the time. So, Hagia, mantra repetition is extremely important in this big picture. We call it japa yoga. Some people just do that. Okay? They've taken all the segments and they bring in japa yoga, and there's, yogas, hatha yoga, and there's, but the fact is they're all one. They're really not separate. It's very important to see that. Okay, prayer is also important. Very good, because prayers open your heart to God. Chanting is very important, and that brings you into the silence. So all those are important. Another vehicle is having a spiritual teacher. Now, not everyone is ready for a spiritual teacher. But if you are, it helps a lot. A spiritual teacher is not somebody who dominates you, but they're your spiritual friend, and let's say more really desadic. They're your friend in the Sufi, a spiritual friend. They support you, they encourage you, and they inspire you. People who've been on this tour I think we could use the word inspiration would be fair to describe it. Raise your hand if you agree with that, okay? Yeah. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Inspiring you to God. It's your work, it's your responsibility, but activating Teshukut Devikut, the divine urge, Nesikat Devikut, the divine kiss, makes life easier, moves you along. So the teacher's role is to create sweetness for you, to keep you from falling in all the holes. I want to say there are many dead bodies along the way, some literally, some not, okay? Let's get that, okay? And the teacher is your friend, they're your helper, they're your support system, they're what keep you from getting lost on many levels. So it's very important to have a teacher along the way. And I mentioned the qualities of Vairagya and Vivekya, equal vision, seeing God in all things equally. Vivekya, which is the ability to tell the difference of real and unreal. And those are very important qualities. There are other qualities that begin to develop. We're going to call them character. So in the mitzvah are doing it, but there's more to character than that. But what are character qualities? Avuts, courage. Very important. You've got to have the courage of the lion. Because for most people, spiritual life is a little scary. Raise your hand if you find that the case. Well, most people are afraid to raise their hand. But you've got to have more courage than that, okay? You wouldn't be telling the truth if you didn't say it's a little scary. Dying into the unknown is scary for most people, right? It's like, that's the way it is. You got to have that. And then, kvod, honor. Your word has honor. Your word has meaning. Okay? I think it's called Arvet, which is responsibility, and Musar, morals and ethics. These are all just foundations, qualities of character that, using different words in Advaita Vedanta, real Advaita Vedanta, not neo-Advaita Vedanta, are inherent before you're even ready to hear the higher teachings. And see, when you really get it, you don't hear the higher teachings. You become the higher teachings. You get it because the portals are open and you're having the direct experience of the higher teachings. And then I'll say the 3 T's, which kind of overlap. Tzedakah, which is the service and charity. Teshuvah. And now I'm going to give you a different understanding of teshuvah. Well, teshuvah is correcting what you did. That's the small, Katnut level, okay? The large understanding is you become the image of God. You return to God. That's the real teshuvah. You become the image of God as your truth. And that's what happens in the enlightenment process. Okay? And tefillah, the prayer. Those are all key components when we look at the different portals. And I mentioned, again, the Kundalini, as much Kundalini awakening Shaktipat as possible, because it keeps opening and opening and moving the energies along that encourage you. So all these things happen. And then the final thing, and this is the thing I want you to get, you can't technique your way to God. You cannot technique your way to God. Please get that. And on top of that, you can't eat your way to God either. That's just another technique. These are things that support you, but ultimately, the waking up process, the liberation process, is an act of grace. Now here's the good news. Doesn't matter. Where are you going? Okay? And also understand you can't lose what you never had. But we have it. And grace is when it occurs for us. Now, this way of life that I'm talking about is just a beautiful way to live. Life becomes beautiful and simple and glowing, and I'm going to use the word barur, which means you start distinguishing between the real and unreal. That's viveka. It's the Hebrew word for vivek, yeah, distinguishing between the real and unreal. The constant barur, enlightenment is like a post-barur state. You just get the difference between the real and unreal, okay? So these are all like, this is fun. Like spiritual life is not hard, it's really, really fun. You feel good, you're awake, you're alert, you're turned on, you're in love. I mean, come on. It's what everybody wants to get. And it's like spiritual life creates that inner experience of that. So with that understanding, those are the beautiful, ecstatic portals that take us to the divine kiss and to the awakening of the truth. That grace. So we're prepared to receive the grace, and we receive it whenever it's our time. You can't push that one, okay? And it doesn't matter because you're having a good time. So may everyone be blessed that they continue to have a good time on this wonderful way of awakening and awakening. Amen, amen, amen. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. It's time for questions. Okay, yes?
You have recently started to use the term, or came together with the term, enduring radiant health. I know it's not so much part of this talk, but however, it's definitely a vessel or a foundation. So enduring radiant health, could you weave that into the context of liberation? First thing, what it is, and is that relevant?
One of my gurus, Swami Muktananda, used to say, you should always remember and go by graveyards. Why? Why should I go to a graveyard? I mean, it's like, what's that about? And what he was saying is, you have a limited amount of time to do your spiritual practices, because if you get old and arthritic and stiff, you can't exactly sit in full lotus for an hour or two, right? And you don't have the energy to focus on God because you're too weak, if you understand what I'm saying. So enduring radiant health is a state of health you reach where you're perpetual. The energy is always there. You're at the turned on peak all day long, and it's just a way of being in the world where your health and vitality is unbroken. Where'd that model come from? Moshe's 120 years old. He hasn't lost any vision, and his vitality has not diminished. So that's a simple model, but it is a model of, again, the liberation, but you're able to maintain that so you can live as long as you need to wake up. Anybody ever heard of Tapasini Maharaj? No. So Tapasini Maharaj lived to be 186. Now how did he do that? Well, the process of Kaya Kalpa. What was his point? Okay, Kaya Kalpa is like he was underground for a year, doing prayer and silence and so forth, 3 years, 3 months and no time. What's the point? He said, I have to be healthy and alive long enough to wake up. So after he woke up, he stopped doing Kaya Kalpa and he left his body. That's what enduring radiant health is you leave it the old-fashioned way. You know, people didn't used to get sick when they died. It started with Jakob, he sneezed. Before him, he didn't have that problem. And you look at Aaron and Miriam and Moshe, they left in perfect health. That's enduring radiant health. So when it's your time, done. So that's the key. So enduring radiant health is that which sustains you so you can continue your spiritual unfoldment. So good question.